Morning. I'm not sure what your experiences of the coronavirus and lockdown has been, but for many it's meant loss of freedom. We haven't been able to go where we wanted when we wanted, haven't been able to see loved ones, haven't been able to see grandchildren. We've been denied spending time with those we love. And some have even missed out on spending that time when people were dying or attending their funeral. There's been many insecurities, lack of food, lack of being able to access healthcare. Would the NHS cope? Would the economy cope? Would there be a ventilator for me if I got ill? For many, I think it was the first time that they appreciated the fragility of life in a way like no other before. Within my team at work, we've experienced various tragedies, really. Fairly early on, one of my patients lost her husband to coronavirus. And I can remember her texting me saying that it physically hurts. And I had to text her back saying that was grief and it would feel like that. The nursing sister of the elderly mental health ward in a team I used to work died of coronavirus. And I shared the distress and anger of my friend who'd worked with her. It's strange seeing someone you've met's photo on the news as a statistic of a healthcare worker who has lost their life during the pandemic. We joined up with another team as their building closed, and although I didn't know this nurse, we shared and entered into her sadness of losing her baby due to the coronavirus. Also, as a team, we were rocked by the news that a lovely, gentle colleague on a home visit was very viciously attacked by a patient. He's suffered life-changing injuries and his life will never be the same again. Last week I did an assessment over the phone on a man who was feeling suicidal. The main reason for this was that he was worried about how he'd support his family and pay his mortgage. The reality is life hurts for a lot of people, and God asks us to stand beside them, share and carry one another's burdens. Ecclesiastes 3:4 tells us there's a time to weep and there's a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Galatians 6:2 tells us to share each other's burdens. For my Old Testament module, I wrote an essay about what the experience of the Jews in exile could teach us today. One writer I quoted explained that for the Jews of the Old Testament, exile meant so much more than just geographical displacement. It was a loss of their structured and reliable world which gave meaning and understanding. And I think there are many similarities between exile and the pandemic that we've experienced. One simple example being that the temple was destroyed and they had to find new ways to worship. All of us at times in our lives feel a sense of abandonment by God. Life events happen, losses or bereavements. We feel rocked to our foundations and struggle to understand what God is doing. The reality is, in a worshipping church at any one time, there will always be someone in the room rejoicing and someone in the midst of tragedy. Jesus was no stranger to sadness and lament. John 11:33 explains how when he saw Mary and the other people mourning the death of Lazarus, he was upset. He too started to cry, joining them in their tears. Now, I think Jesus ultimately knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and ultimately all would be well. But he took time. He took time to share and acknowledge the grief of those who were mourning. During exile, the Jews learnt to lament. They needed to grieve their losses and express their resentful sadness about what was and now is and never will be again. Lament is a prayer worship language which allows us to weep with those who weep and walk with them on the long road of sorrow. Lament gives voice to our struggles. It helps us learn lessons, helps deepen our trust and relationship with God, tunes our hearts to the truth undergirding our lives. It invites us to think about the brokenness of our life and the source of our hope and where we need to put our trust. It's the prayer language that stakes its claim on the promises of God in the pains of life. It is the lament of Good Friday and Jesus' crucifixion, which is answered 3 days later by the empty tomb and Christ's resurrection. But we need not jump to hope too early, because we can't cope with the sorrow and pain of those around us. As often this invalidates the pain of those suffering. We have to be willing to walk through the valley of the shadow of death with those who are hurting. Romans 12:15 tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with all who mourn. 1 Corinthians 12 says when one part of the body hurts, we all hurt. Ren Collective's Chris Llewellyn was drawn to the genre of lament after the Manchester Arena bombing. He explains how the experience of crisis can make us less honest in our worship or maybe stay silent. A third of the Psalms are lament. Lament gives a structure to express our feelings, helps us journey through the valley till we can emerge at the other side and bow in grateful worship. Without lament, silence, bitterness, and even anger can dominate our spiritual lives instead. Lament has a structure. It starts with complaint, bluntly laying out the reason behind the sorrow and the emotions we are feeling. It requests God to act, to do something, and it ends with the renewing of trust and praise based on past promises. It takes faith to pray when you're in pain. Heartfelt cries of lament are often messy. These are some of the lyrics from Weep With Me. You know I believe. Help my unbelief. Here in the shadows, here I will offer my praise. It claims that what's true in the light is true in the dark, that you're good and you're kind and you care for this heart. Lord, I believe. You weep with me. Here in the midst of my lament, I have faith, yes, I still believe. That you love me, your plans are to prosper me. You're working everything for good, even when I can't see it. Turn my lament into a love song. From this lament, raise up an anthem. Lord, I believe that you weep with me. Lament can be both. We can do it on our own or we can do it in a group. And I think post-pandemic, the church will and needs to take the opportunity to play a part in helping people process and journey through their grief and loss. I was talking to my hairdresser last weekend and she said that there can't be a single person this virus hasn't touched in one way or the another. Lament is the language of loss as we grieve together. They were advised not to skip through lament too soon. Ultimately, lament is for now in our current broken world, but it will not be forever. I think one of my favourite verses of the Bible is Revelation 21 verse 4. which says, He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. That's our hope for the future. But for now we live in a broken world where injustice, pain, loss, sickness and death surround us. So maybe our new song for this season and our challenge is to develop the skills and prayer, the language of lament.